Today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic which is regarding the relationships, dating, friendship, and many more tendencies of a Gemini. What really attracts a Gemini? A few tips how to help your Gemini friend, or in case you are Gemini yourself, then how do you navigate these relationships? What are you expecting from the other person? And in case you have a Gemini in your life, what are they expecting out of you when it comes to relationships and even in general friendships? Because we cannot eliminate that from Gemini's equation completely. So without any further ado, let's begin on this. Now, when we talk about relationships, Gemini is a very interesting sign, right? Because relationships come to them in a very difficult fashion compared to others. Normally, people have a very big misconception that, Geminis are extremely extroverted, they are very talkative by nature, they really love to be able to express themselves. A lot of people would also say that, Gemini also have this tendency that they can easily talk to you and then win your over heart. But the reality is actually very contrasting, I would say. You won't find the extroversion tendency of Gemini everywhere. Gemini is a sign that is represented by duality. Its very symbol is the twins itself. So when we talk about Gemini, we cannot eliminate the idea that they are not the people who you are seeing on the face value, right? So you need to be able to dive deeper into understanding Gemini. Are these Gemini folks only all about humor? Are these people only all about talk and they don't like to walk the talk which they are claiming? Let's understand frame by frame exactly how exactly we need to navigate it. Now, when we talk about Gemini, one thing which is very important and in general about any Mercury sign, even if you take Virgo, right? It is your vibe, your first impression, because they have a very strong sense of judgment. And even though they are not telling you on face, and most of the time, trust me, a Gemini will never tell you on face whether they have actually liked your vibe or hated you. In fact, they have a very default answer for all your queries that you are a person who is somewhat valuable to them, and they would exactly pretend that way and continue to keep that equation because they want to develop a connection with you in order to understand you, in order to decode you. And if you are not allowing them to time enough to evaluate you, then they just drift apart for you. Now, a very interesting thing which you need to take in charge about Gemini in general is that these are the set of people who would talk a lot to the set of people who they actually don't love. And in fact, the people that they actually care about, they are not even talking to them on a regular basis, you can say. So you can actually see the duality over here. Many people, might mistake this as being rude, might mistake this as being somewhat weird, might mistake this as Gemini not giving them enough attention. But the reality is actually very different. Gemini has a very deep connection when it comes to understanding the boundaries between extroversion and introversion. A Gemini would have the capability to go ahead and make a friend without forming any deep attachment to them right then and there. So these people are known for their small talk tendencies, and not every Gemini actually likes to small talk. There would be a very particular way of introducing themselves to you in order to understand you better that they would initiate this small talk. And that is not a way you would actually perceive that they are giving out their hands for a friendship. No, they just want to know you. They're just curious, you can say, to understand what you are up to even understand, do you match or resonate their intellectual level correctly or not? Or do you claim something which you are not? Are you doing a pretense out of something? So that's what Gemini is essentially about. And the small talk tendencies would have a very subtle characteristic you would actually note. People who are Gemini would really enjoy the fact that they want to escape out of the conversation after a brief period of time. If you are actually not intellectually resonating with them, they would rather prefer to end the conversation, but they want to make sure that you don't feel that they have ended this conversation in an abrupt fashion. You don't feel that they have internally judged you already, which sounds weird, but it is very true. It is very different from how Virgos operate. A Virgo can be like a silent spectator who is going to see you like a hawk. He's going to get an impression about you. He or she would actually understand what you are up to, and then basis the judgment, suddenly either they have drifted apart from you after judging you as a negative, or if they have judged you as a positive, they are going to come closer to you and become so loquacious that you are going to be so surprised that, oh my god, this person was actually holding back so much amount of talking and talkative ability inside of them. That is unbelievable. That is how a Virgo operates, but a Gemini doesn't operate that way. A Gemini wants to extend a hand of friendship to you no matter what. And by the time they leave the conversation, they just make sure that they have a leeway enough that in case ever you are needed in their life at a later point in time, they can still approach you. And that is what it sets apart them from Virgo. That is what serves as a double-edged sword when it comes to understanding love and relationships when we talk about Gemini. Gemini has this tendency that they actually don't like to talk with people who they love a lot. Trust me, they don't. They are very non-confrontative people. They like to introduce humor in order to mask their insecurity many a times, that they actually care about you. They don't want to be so direct about telling you that they love you. They don't want to be so direct about that they actually care for you. But they're going to bring in small, small moments of humor where they would actually introduce the idea that you need to pick up and you need to take cues. You need to understand those emotional cues which they are going to give you, that they actually care about you. And that comes in a very subtle scenario. Let's say, for example, a Gemini actually is in love with you. A hypothetical case, and you are supposed to go out. Suddenly you make some other plans with some other person. Now the Gemini will not directly tell you that they are going to miss you. Trust me, they would never ever take that initiative to tell you that they are going to miss you. Rather, what they are going to come up, they're going to come up with an alternative paradigm that might seem very attractive to you. Why? Because they have observed you like a hawk. They know what excites you. They know what thrills you. They also know what hurts you, interestingly. We'll come to that at a later point in time. But that is fundamentally how the Gemini operates, right? So they would actually text you, or they would give you a call and give you an alternative plan scenario where they might actually be compromising a little bit, but they would want you to actually say yes to that alternative plan and cancel your other plans in order to accommodate them. Now this way, Gemini takes the higher burden that you are actually interested to spend time with me, but they haven't actually confessed to you directly that they are interested in you. That is how things really operate. That is how a Gemini moon or a Gemini rising would actually love to extend. Even a very prominent Gemini placement would emulate a very similar behavior. So you can see it from Sun as well sometimes. What really interests Gemini is that there has to be a spark in this relationship. There has to be a spark first in the friendship. Now, Gemini is a sign which is ruled by Mercury. So eventually love eventually would come, and ultimately would come only when you have accepted them as a friend. They are really not interested to have a one-sided relationship at all. They really want to be there with you. If you are taking an impulsive decision, they want to have an equal say in being impulsive. If you are clumsy, Gemini is going to be equally clumsy. If you are angry, Gemini is going to be equally angry. They want to be very receptive towards you. And this receptiveness is potentially very different from a Cancer. A Cancer would be very receptive about your emotional cues and want to suddenly take care of you or try to sacrifice for you. Gemini is not that way. Gemini wants to tell you that, boss, you are not alone. I'm your double twin. I'm your dual. And we are going to conquer this world together. That is how I see, and that is how I tell you that you are actually my love. They won't actually come and tell you that, I'm really missing you. They won't actually come and like to confront you that I really love you. In fact, they would hate a lot if you actually go ahead and do that same thing with them. And that is what really doesn't work between a Taurus and Gemini many a times. We would come to the details about it further, but that is how fundamentally a Gemini would operate. A Gemini would want you to come and assist them when they need it. But they would never ever want you to give an idea or try to demean them by telling or reminding you that you have helped them in this scenario. They don't like to keep grudges a lot inside of them. They would get hurt, but eventually they would forgive you and try to move on away from you. So anybody who is trying to remind them again and again about any past mistakes, irrespective whether it was something which they did or which the other person was at fault, they would actually feel very repelled by it, and they would feel that you actually are being very hypocritical to them, and therefore they would drift apart from you. And the way they drift apart is also interesting. You would see that a Gemini would always have some sort of mood swings. Trust me, they would have. Many people would claim that this is more of a Cancer thing. Many people would claim this is sometimes more of a water sign thing. But no, trust me, Gemini has an equal amount of mood swings as well. And the way they cater to these mood swings is very whimsical, because it's a sign which encourages humor so much. You cannot see that they would actually indulge into their mood swings directly, but you can easily make out that they are pissed at you. They're gonna give you indirect emotional cues. They're gonna say that I don't want to come with you for some plan. They're gonna give an alternative plan which they would be having and start trying to avoid you. And the worst part is they won't give you a room of any explanation why they are pissed off at you. Now, this seems like a very water sign thing many a times, but it's not, trust me. And this is a very different way. And if you try to confront the Gemini, that is going to make things worse. The only interesting way you need to handle a Gemini who is angry and does not want to hang out with you anymore, or does not like to, acknowledge you anymore, is by moving on along with them. That means invite them over for a little bit of a hangout, let's say. They would be slightly reluctant, or try to gel yourself back into their plans. And while you are gelling back into their plans, remind them of an intellectual vibe as a moment which you shared earlier. How it could be? Let's say, for example, a lot of people would say that Gemini loves bookstores, right? So let's say, for example, hypothetically, you met a Gemini earlier in a bookstore, and you know this Gemini's book choices and the way they actually like to read. Of course, a Gemini is going to be a voracious reader. They're going to be a very curious person all the time, irrespective whether it's a male or female or any other also. They would be super curious about a lot of things. And it's very easy for you to read what they actually want to express and what they actually love to read about. So let's say, for example, you are hanging out at a bookstore and suddenly both of you choose the same book. That is something that would attract the Gemini more towards you. Trust me, because they would feel that no, even though I am angry with this person, even though the other person is also not a little bit, quirky, I would say, because sometimes Gemini actually love eccentric choices. But let's say that they also don't care you about you a lot. But since you have resonated with the vibe, or since you have reminded them with an intellectual vibe that you shared together earlier also, they suddenly get attracted back to you. And suddenly they want to reconcile with you. Because they have realized one very interesting thing, that one, you never confronted them or directly told them on their face that either they are at fault or you are at fault. Two, you had the courtesy to take an initiative to bring them to their favorite place. Three, your intellectual vibe still resonates with the Gemini. And these three things are going to attract the Gemini back to your life very fast, because they would evaluate that, no, this is a friend who is worth still having in my life. And when they actually remind you that you are a friend, that is the moment you can actually feel that they would transition it towards love as well. A Gemini will never confess love in a very direct way. For them, a friendship is almost equivalent to having love in their life, because they would cherish it that way. And therefore, expecting them to have a biased treatment towards you, give you more attention compared to their peer circle, these are the sort of things that would piss them off more, because they would actually want you to feel that they can take you for granted. Okay, and this sounds a little bit toxic to you, because a lot of people, let's say a Taurus, might need very active acknowledgement about a lot of things. But trust me, Gemini gives that acknowledgement in a very silent fashion. And if you get used to it, if you actually welcome them and keep them accommodated in your life, you would feel that they are like a crazy support pillar. And not just because they would actually make you feel better. There would be certain signs who would like to heal you and make you feel better. A Gemini is going to feel better themselves when you are feeling better. That is what sets them really apart in a relationship. If you get sad, they get sad. If you get happy, they get happy. If you feel that somebody is not worth having in life, they would resonate it and say, yeah, that person is not worth having in life. And that equivalent sense of judgment, similar to Virgo as well to a certain extent, is what is gonna make you crave love and potential friendships for a Gemini and be in a relationship with them. That's what sets them apart. And this is not being receptive. Being receptive is very different. This is like accepting you in such a fashion that you are evolving and growing together. And this mutual growth and this mutual ambition for a relationship, this mutual development of an intellectual vibe together is what sets apart Gemini, and it makes them worth having a relationship with. Definitely. All right, let's talk about some positive traits about the relationship with the Gemini. What are their expectations? We will try to understand that as well. What does not work with them? That means the negative trait side as well, we will understand. So let's start with what is the expectation when it comes to a Gemini going into a relationship with you. Now, one very interesting way to first of all put it is that you cannot know the moment when you have entered into a relationship with a Gemini. There is no clear answer about that because they won't be very directly discerning towards you, and they won't want you to, accept it directly that you are in a committed relationship with them. Rather, they have their own ways of bringing it in a very humorous form towards you. And it's difficult for them to directly come and tell you that, boss, I want to be in a committed relationship with you. But they are going to give you a lot of emotional cues. They're going to spend more time with you. They're going to, irritate you sometimes. You'll be slightly annoyed by them. They might even prank you a little bit. And that is how Gemini likes to express its love towards you. And the more they are spending their time with you, the more they are giving you a silent acknowledgement about your intellectual vibe with them, the more you are actually coming near and decoding the fact that you are going to be in a relationship with a Gemini. Second important thing which you need to understand is that you need to respect this slow-paced way which Gemini is trying to form when it comes to relationship. If you go ahead and tell a Gemini directly that, boss, I want to be in a relationship with you, chances are you wouldn't even get a clear answer right then and there. You would get a very gray area of an answer which is like, I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, and they're just gonna dive into a little bit of an analysis paralysis and into their duality, even though it might be true that they actually themselves want or have a desire to come into a committed relationship with you. The simple reason being that a Gemini really doesn't want people to come and give that as a giveaway directly. They want them to actually spend some time with them just the way they would also vibe with them. And then once it is resonated, a Gemini doesn't want you to even have a direct confrontation telling that, yeah, it's a committed relationship. They just want you to accept it internally within yourself that, yeah, I am spending a lot of time with you, and that means I really like you. And that is something that we resonate with each other, and therefore it is understood intellectually that you are already in a committed relationship with a Gemini. You don't need to bring it up as an active parameter or as an active yes or no or as an active acknowledgement. So it's very difficult to even know whether you have went into a committed relationship with a Gemini or not, because it is just another form or upgrade to the level of friendship which they are bringing on the table for you. So in order to make sure that whether you are in a relationship with Gemini or not, you need to read or learn emotional cues. That is for sure. You need to come and read out the emotional cues of the other person, whether they are actually spending a lot of time with you, whether this Gemini person is actually, spending most of their day putting attention on you instead of, paying attention to somebody else, whether they are actually talking all the time towards you. And one very interesting way to put it, whether the Gemini is actually arguing you all the time. Now, this may sound wrong that if somebody is fighting me, is that supposed to be a validation for the fact that we are in a relationship? But it's very interesting. A Gemini is sharing a very similar trait like, let's say, a Scorpio or a Sagittarius. They're going to argue with you all day if they actually care about you. And the moment they have stopped arguing with you, you can assume that they are a little pissed off at you, or probably you both are in disagreement about a certain process or a certain task or a certain situation, and that is one of the important giveaways for you to know whether a Gemini is actually angry with you or not. So that is how things shape up over here. There is no fine line between a relationship and a friendship, to be very honest, because for Geminis it seems almost like there is an upgrade to friendship where they have extended the liking which they have for you and transform that into love for you instead. For them it is just an upgrade for that, and if we are not satisfied with that level of commitment, or if you are not satisfied with the fact that you are seeing relationship as a completely different thing from a friendship, in that case a Gemini will not entertain you that easily, because for them it's important for them to have you in the same page, on the same page about transitioning the friendship into a relationship. They want to make sure that their equation of a friendship does not change just because we are now committed. And therefore, they would behave as if you are continued in the same way which goes. And this is one of the interesting dual natures of them rather than an inertia, I would say. The idea that a Gemini is dual, we need to fundamentally understand why a Gemini is dual. It is because they have a certain set expected inertia about your behavior towards them. And the moment you try to, decimate that inertia, or you try to change your behavior, a Gemini brings out the other side towards you, which you weren't expecting. And that is how the duality operates. The duality has ironically got a rigidness to it. The duality ironically has a fixed side to it, which it is not easy to decode or process for the other person. It might be very easy for you to come and tell a Gemini that you love them a lot, but it might be very difficult for the Gemini person to do the same confession towards you as well, even if they are actually in love with you. So you cannot have the same set of expectations, laid to in order to see a Gemini react. You cannot have a set fixed principles in order to, let Gemini react. It is very much possible that Gemini will not ever say love you too back again to you, even if you have confessed with you. And their way of showing it would be through very interesting ways. So now let's first of all understand the positives of coming into a relationship with a Gemini in the first place. Now the first biggest positive with the Gemini is that they actually make sure that you are intellectually compatible with each other. Now this may sound like, okay, what if I am not intellectually compatible with a Gemini? Chances are you are not a person who is actually valued by the Gemini. The Gemini is just treating you like a friend, and Gemini has this trait that they can make you a friend who can fall in love with them, but they have not formed any attachment towards you, to be frank. Even though they are treating people in such a fashion that you are not able to pinpoint that, okay, that person must be his boyfriend or girlfriend, or that person is the committed relationship of this Gemini person. And therefore, you end up feeling that almost everybody who is being treated by Gemini is actually a potential relationship for them. So, it's very difficult for you to tell that whether you are actually interested, interesting as per a Gemini or not. You need to face that fact directly. It is very much possible that it's a one-sided way, and the Gemini hates confronting and breaking it back to you that, boss, okay, I don't love you in that way, and they won't ever tell you, and you are supposed to find that yourself. So if a Gemini actually loves you, they go ahead and make sure to show a very interesting emotional cue from their side. It is that you would be having the same set of vibe as a Gemini. When a Gemini is coming to you and trying to judge other people around and this entire world along with you, it's a direct, clear giveaway that the Gemini actually loves you a lot. And this is how they actually make you compatible. They even evolve your space if they love you. That means, let's say if you are not into reading a certain genre, the Gemini will try to make you fall in love with that genre by introducing a new set of impulsive adventure-like activity into your life, by making you read that books which you have never read before, by introducing a completely new innovative side of yourself which you might not have discovered yourself, and then you end up actually enjoying that, and then they will actually go and reconcile with the Gemini, and they find that, okay, intellectual vibe which I'm sharing. So this is one of the strongest things you can get back in a relationship with the Gemini, that they would make sure that there is a mutual growth along with you through intellectual compatibility. Second trait, a very interesting trait about the Gemini is the way they would intuitively pick up your emotional cues. Now, it's a very big misconception that a Gemini is not an emotional person. In fact, quite contrarily, they are trying to hide their insecurity by being too talkative, by making sure that they are not being too intense, and a very good giveaway to actually make out whether you are a special person to the Gemini or not is, notice this weird trait in them. They won't be talking to you as much they are talking to people whom they don't care about. If they actually care about you, a Gemini will be talking very less to you compared to other people's and other social situations. A Gemini has a very natural knack of handling social situations. You won't imagine that an introverted person like this has an extroverted side that can handle so many social gatherings all simultaneously. That doesn't mean they don't get burned out. They do get burned out sometimes as well. But the interesting part towards this is that a Gemini will not talk to you if they actually end up liking you. And they would be a little hesitant in talking to you. That is because a Gemini likes to speak their mind very straightforward way many a times in a very non-confrontative fashion. They are going to be very humorous about it. They're going to come and tell you a joke which is supposed to be a dig on you. Instead, it would feel as if it's a compliment on you. And this is something even the seventh sign from Gemini, which is Sagittarius, borrows from them, and they do it better than the Gemini. That's what makes Gemini most attracted to Sagittarius many a times. But the interesting part is the Gemini will always try to find a humorous way of putting, in telling you that you are actually special, and they would hesitate in talking with you if they feel that you are actually very special. The simple reason being that they themselves are a little insecure that I don't want to lose this person. So they are very careful with their words over there. And therefore, it's a direct giveaway that if they are talking less to you, you actually mean something to them. Third very positive and interesting trait about a Gemini is that they read emotional cues like anything. They are gonna come, see you, observe you, since they are very judgmental people, right? They really strongly appreciate good first impressions. And first impressions are very difficult for them to change in their minds, something which they share like a toxic trait to Virgo as well. But a Gemini is very clumsy compared to a Virgo. So they might slide or let it go sometimes when they see a different person in you if you have evolved. Unlike a Virgo who won't change their opinions about you even if you behave differently later. That is how a Gemini evolves, you can say. And they would intuitively pick up whether you are happy, whether you are sad, whether you are actually angry. And the interesting part is now they know how to pick it up, but that is one of their negative traits as well, which I'll talk later, that they won't confront it or react the way you are expecting. For example, you are in a relationship with a Gemini. You are sad at the moment. You are expecting that the other person should come and solace you. They might end up cracking a joke that would lighten your mood, but they are not interested to take your baggage of overly, sadness. And you would actually feel better as well because it really depends how the other person is expecting the Gemini to react as well. Let's say, for example, if it's a Taurus, right? They're expecting, no, I need some validation or acknowledgement about my sadness. And if the Gemini is not giving that, they're going to feel, okay, probably this person, whether she's a girl or a boy or any other gender, they are not very serious about me. And that would hurt a Taurus quite a lot. But let's say if it's a Scorpio, let's say, for example, 7 to Taurus, they don't want the other person to actually come and sympathize with their issues. Rather, they would prefer that the other person cracks up their mood or lightens it up with a humorous joke that describes their situation and that alleviates their pain. They hate when people come and sympathize with them, right? So a Gemini could gel with the Scorpio in a very interesting way over here. So that is how things really shape up. A Gemini will not feel sad for you when you are super sad. And this may sound toxic a little bit, but that doesn't literally mean that they are in complete unacknowledgement about your emotions. It simply means that they want you to see a better or a broader picture about this. That means a Gemini would come and try to indirectly, communicate to you that would playing victim or would being sad solve your problem? If it does solve your problem, that I am super curious about it. And if it is not solving your problem, let me crack up a humorous joke and try to show you the broader picture that you can do something else and act upon this situation in order to elevate yourself back into happiness. So that is how a Gemini would like to fundamentally operate over here. So this is actually one of their positive traits, provided you are expecting that sort of a reaction from them. The fourth and interesting, good or positive trait you can see in a Gemini when they are in a relationship with you is that they would make sure that you are accommodated in their life, very interestingly. A Gemini usually is a little bit selfish, to be frank. When it comes to planning out activities, they would always put me first. They would always think that whether I am going to get something advantageous out of the situation or not. They would always think whether, the other person is bringing something to the table for me or not. But if they actually like you would see that they are indirectly cancelling their plans or trying to make changes in the plans in order to accommodate you very seamlessly. And it almost feels a little bit natural to you, but to be honest, it's very, very pre-planned and it's very, very orchestrated also many a times. A Gemini is very predictive in terms of speculating how you are going to react to a certain situation. And they pick up those small emotional cues and then they try to use these cues to improve their reactions towards you. So it's almost like getting into a relationship which keeps on evolving in order to accommodate your changing priorities. Many a times, or an Aquarius, you would have one complaint is that the moment your priorities change a little bit, you don't feel very welcome by them. You don't feel accommodated by them in your life that much. There is a very different side to it. We will talk about them in later videos. But the overall idea being that a Gemini can accommodate your changing priorities very nicely. They adapt with the relationship. And when they adapt with the relationship, the natural stance of a relationship which is supposed to go to become unexciting or transition towards stability compared to the thrill, that is not something which Geminis can relate. There is thrill in their relationship all the time, and this thrill keeps on evolving as per you mature. And that is one of the most fantastic traits, I would say, that you would see a Gemini actually contributing in a relationship. There is no moment where you're going to feel bored by it. The fourth interesting trait over here Gemini has is a Gemini can easily give away by telling you that come over to my place to stay with me, even if they are not talking to you. A Gemini cares for you quite a lot if you are spending time at their home. For them, it is a very security or a mindset security that you are there with them. And that is what they cherish a lot. But interesting part is that they are going to be silent throughout this many a times. They're going to zone out. And when they zone out, they also let you zone out without judging you. So let's say, for example, you are not in a mood to talk. A Gemini will not mind this at all. Let's say if there was Taurus, they would have reacted like crazy to this situation that how dare you ignore me. But a Gemini is totally okay in not getting that attention from you at that moment. And a later point in time when you try to reconcile with them, they would behave as if everything is normal. They totally understand. They don't want you to actually feel any guilt about this at all. Even if you might take a higher moral burden, they're gonna just, rub it off over you, telling that you are worrying about nothing. I didn't even observe that, even though they did, very interestingly. Now, some of you might say that this might turn into a negative trait when they are not being communicative enough with you. But to be honest, some people actually need that zone out phase. And they love when the other person acknowledges and does not judge them for this zone out quite a lot. So that is where the Gemini is actually a wonderful trait. Another interesting positive trait you would see in a Gemini is that they are going to create a world of ambition where you're going to feel a sense of belonging into. A Gemini is very curious about you. And even though you feel like, okay, this person is not caring all that much, this person knows exactly what you like. They like to bring out the other side of your personality within their lives. And they would know you in a way that other people don't know you. And you might end up trusting the Gemini very early or initial stage. You might end up giving the security of vulnerability towards a Gemini. You might make them your confiding buddy very much. But the interesting part is this actually backlashes and comes out a negative trait. We'll talk about that later. But in general, a Gemini can bring out a very different side of you, which you might not have discovered when you have, gotten into a relationship with them. And this is something that sets it apart because this evolves you as a person as well. We always say this, a Gemini can be a one heck of a lesson for you or one heck of a beautiful gift from nature towards you. And that is very much true. It's very potentially different from move on relationship with water signs or fire signs that runs on emotions, passions, etc. A Gemini just runs on vibe, pure vibe. And that friendship actually translates later into a beautiful sense of belonging. You will never ever feel that you are in a relationship and this is a relationship which is very different the way you are treating your friends. No, you're going to feel you are in a friendship and this friendship has been taken to an elevated level comparatively. And that's what sets it apart because there is a true sense of belonging over here. Both of you just gel and vibe with each other in such a beautiful way. Another interesting positive trait of a Gemini, I would say, is that they have actually very set expectations about what attracts them and what they really want to do. Even though they don't like to confront it, they are going to manipulate you in such a way that you would end up doing what they really love. And then this is their way of telling that you are special, and then they would actually make you discover a new adventure or a new side which you were ignoring initially. And that is something beautiful because again, the same theme, it would be recurring. I would say that you would feel evolved once again when you are in a relationship with Gemini. And that is what the duality over here stands for, to be honest, because it brings out the other side of you as a person as well. It's not exclusive to the fact that the Gemini only is dual by nature. No. Okay, so these are some of the heavy positive traits you're going to see in a Gemini. And apart from this, I would say that they are actually very caring towards you, provided that you are authentic. The moment they sense that you are trying to play the victim unnecessarily, or the moment they sense that playing victim might not necessarily be the best way of handling yourself when you are sad, they're going to be upfront about it by ignoring you. They won't confront you, but they would be still upfront. That's how they operate. So they would give you a moment of realization, which is there. Now let's talk about the flip side to it as well, right? All right. So as we were talking about Gemini, let's come to their negative traits as well. Now, just like the symbol which represents them, which is the twins, they do have negative traits as well. Now, the first negative trait I would say when it comes to relationships with Gemini is one that expectation of communication can get very problematic for some people. What we mean by that is, you would see that a Gemini is just not ready to communicate things in a very proper fashion. They are very good talkers. I am not denying that. They are very good at making sure that they are able to express their opinions. But they don't like to confront things that matter quite a lot many a times. Let's say, for example, you are undergoing a hard patch up with a Gemini and you feel like you need to confront them about this relationship. You need to confront them about a situation that has angered you quite a lot and probably has impacted them also quite a lot. They're going to be not ready to confront you. One, they're going to avoid you. They're going to feel and make you feel even more crap if you are trying to bring up your feelings in an upfront fashion. The simple reason being, a Gemini is ready to forgive and forget very fast. They are more ready and more interested to be in a state of denial when it comes to handling toxicity in a relationship. Let's say, for example, a Gemini has angered you quite a lot. They would now try to behave in such a way with you that nothing happened, everything is normal, and they expect you to resonate that way. That is their way of showing you that, I have forgotten everything, and you should also. Let's start this afresh. But it might not be physically or mentally or intellectually feasible all the time. Sometimes it actually harms them only because they are not ready to face the issues that matter quite a lot, especially when it comes to commitment. They are just not ready to tell you about what's going on in their mind. And it's not their fault entirely. On a subconscious level, they themselves are in a two-minded or in two boats at the same time about you. And it's not like they don't care. They do care. But expressing and confronting about this is really not their strong suit. It might piss you off hell a lot. Second negative trait about a Gemini in a relationship. They might come out as selfish to you, especially when it comes in terms of deciding the activities you're going to indulge in with this person. They would prioritize themselves and their self quite a lot over you. So for somebody who might end up being very sacrificing in a relationship, then I don't recommend them to go into a relationship with a Gemini. A friendship can thrive quite a lot. But if you are willing to sacrifice quite a lot, if you are willing to step out of comfort zone quite a lot for the other person that is a Gemini, then you are gonna be traumatized by them. A Gemini doesn't want you to do it. A Gemini doesn't want you to step out of comfort zone for them. A Gemini wants you to show your care in such a way that both of you are in your comfort zones. If you are trying to show that you actually care by stepping out of your comfort zone, forget about the acknowledgement. You're never going to get it from the Gemini. And you may complain that they are very thankless about it, but that's the way they are. They don't want you to actually go out of your comfort zone in order to accommodate or help them. That is one of the reasons they start off with intellectual compatibility to understand you in the first place. The interesting part about a Gemini over here is that even though this might seem like a negative trait, every trait of a Gemini is almost dual. That means it has a double-edged sword type of a tendency that it may seem negative to you, but there is a positive towards it. So again, that is how they actually term themselves to be. But to be honest, sometimes it really backlashes in their relationship when they try to indulge that way. The third negative trait about a Gemini is their denial. They will not ever want to acknowledge a mistake if they have made it. And this is fundamentally different from the first negative trait that I mentioned, that they don't want to confront. This is very different. They just want to stay in a state of denial about a lot of things. Let's say, for example, let's take a scenario that you decided to help up a Gemini who actually asked for help from you. And then you went ahead and you sacrificed quite a lot for them. Let's say, they came and asked you that they need your help in driving them to office. A hypothetical scenario, you decided, yeah, I would do that. Now a Gemini would make that as a regular thing for you. That means, you were expecting it, that it was a once for a while thing for you, but to be honest, they would say, let's do it again and again, and it's okay, because they are enjoying the moment with you, to be honest. But then if you actually confront them about it, that was it intended that way, they would say no, it wasn't, and they would be in a state of big denial that, I actually asked you for help. No, you were enjoying with me as much as, I was enjoying with you while going on for a ride to the office together. And that is why this is something that really doesn't matter to me. So it might hurt you quite a lot then and there itself, but actually that's how it is. Fourth thing is, even though the Gemini hate playing victim, or they actually hate people who play victim, since they don't want to sympathize with them directly, many a time they are very habitual complainers themselves. You would actually see them complaining about very small discomfort that occurs in their life quite a lot. Let's say, for example, you are planning to accommodate a Gemini in their life. You brought a cake for them on their birthday. The expectation of a reaction from your side is that they're gonna thank you about it. No, they won't. They would ask you, why did you do this? This was not required, which is a usual reaction, you would say, but they would go ahead an extra mile and says, don't ever do this again as well. Okay, they're gonna go in that sense of a direction sometimes. Now that's just a hypothetical scenario to display to you how it actually happens, not necessarily to be taken literally, but that's how it is. A Gemini does not want you to go into a zone where they feel that you are doing some sort of an ehsan, or we would say that you are doing some sort of a sacrifice for them that requires them to have a future obligation on you. They won't accept it. They don't want you to. So many a times you would see that coming to their fifth negative trait, because they don't want to take obligations. That means, they just don't want you to help them even when they are in need of help. They just want to make sure over here that they are, hesitant in asking for help quite a lot from you. So you are supposed to take the entire moral burden in a relationship with a Gemini to decide when they actually need help, and be prepared to have a thankless reaction from them about it, because they are going to claim that they were strong enough to handle that situation by themselves. And in reality, they do appreciate that you actually took initiative. But since moral encompass by saying that, okay, since boss, I never asked for it, I am not bound to any obligation to you. You did it out of your own intentions. Okay, I didn't ask for you to do it. And that is hell of toxic, especially when they are beat trapped in very bad situations in life. And it is almost like they don't want to actually acknowledge even a moment of sacrifice from your side about it. Another interesting negative trait for a Gemini that you would observe very easily is that their tendency to be socially isolated. Now, this is a very ironical trait, right? A lot of people in you over here are gonna come and claim that no, they are very extroverted, they actually are extremely talkative, they are very loquacious, but the duality hits. Anybody who has lived with a Gemini in a house knows them how dual they are. That means, this is the same person that could be hanging out with you in a social setting as if both of you are best friends forever. And suddenly after coming to home, they're going to go and trap themselves and lock themselves in their room inside without responding to your needs, without actually even acknowledging your existence in the same place. And they don't want you to leave. That is interesting, because they have a strong fear of social isolation. They want you to be in the other room while they are in their own room quietly, both separately. And when they are in a mood, they are going to come out of the room and intellectually vibe with you or talk with you a little bit and then go back into that zone. So this is how they fundamentally operate. But the moment you are leaving the house, they get very insecure about it. They fear social isolation. They don't want to interact with you in the house, but at the same time, they don't want you to leave. That is their comfort zone. And that seems a little toxic, right? At the end of the day, you would see that this person doesn't care. You might perceive it that way, but they don't intend to show it that way. It is simply because they want to always be in an introspective zone. At the same time, they just want to make sure that, yeah, I am loved by somebody. So stay in another room, I'll stay in another room. And when I am in a mood, let's come and interact with each other. Let's vibe with each other. And then again, go back separate ways. And later on, when you are going back to the social setting, suddenly they're going to pop up out of the window that, yeah, we are going together in this. Okay, so that is how things are really done. Next negative trait of a Gemini. A Gemini will not make you feel that you are somebody who is a separate entity if you are in a committed relationship with them. This is one of their positive traits as well, right? That they're going to treat their friends in a very equal, elevated sense of justice fashion as they would actually treat you in a relationship. So if you are feeling like that you need preferential bias treatment compared to their friends, forget about it. You won't even feel that you are differentiated. And when you don't feel differentiated for certain signs, including Gemini themselves, we'll talk about that when I come to Gemini and Gemini compatibility, but they themselves would feel that, okay, I am not getting the required sense of security and validation that I was seeking in a relationship from this. And when that happens, both of you drift apart. And the Gemini wants to be in denial about it. They don't want you to come and tell them that, I am drifting apart from you because you are not paying proper attention to me. That is how they fundamentally like to operate over here. And this is how oddly it really becomes. Now, the interesting part you would see is that, a Gemini is also going to be making sure that they get whatever they want, irrespective whether you are in a committed relationship with them or not. They have a set expectation which they have in mind if they have befriended you. And even though you don't know it directly over there, they do keep that in mind. And if there are odds that you are a resourceful person, or if you seem like a person who might be of some help to them in the future, even if you both have ended it, they would still keep you in such a way that you are approachable. And by saying approachable, it means that if they ask you for help, you won't be able to say no to them. That is something which is very toxic and again a very positive trait for Gemini, because they know exactly what to say in order to make sure that this is not a breakup. They would just leave it hanging. You would feel like there was not an official time period when we actually broke up. We are still kind of friends. We don't know what this equation is. What kind of zone is this? We don't know, or we are not aware about that. And that is how things really function over here. That you won't be able to say no. They have ended a zone in that way. So that is how. That is the level of manipulation they can actually go ahead and be able to do when we talk about Geminis in general. And another interesting toxic trait is that a Gemini in a relationship expects you to say yes for whatever their quirks and whims are about. Let's say if they are planning an adventure activity, you are supposed to say yes. And some of these signs actually try to evolve or change their interest in order to accommodate them. But a Gemini, since they have taken the higher burden of thinking that they helped you discover a new interest which you never had initially, they don't owe you anything. Now you are an equal level passionate person about that particular interest or hobby which they have ignited, and therefore you are coming with them to indulge in that activity just because upon your own free will. They didn't influence it according to them. That's a very toxic trait. Many a times if somebody has inertias about something and they have the idea that I don't want to try something, a Gemini evolved them, made them try it, and then suddenly shunned them off by saying that no, okay, probably I'm not interested. Or they just made them realize that you are doing this out of your own free will. I just a medium to you in order to channelize that interest. But that's how it is. That is what Gemini is all about. Now, another interesting negative trait about Gemini is the plethora of mood swings you're going to see in a relationship. And this plethora of mood swings are going to be so difficult for you to catch. Trust me, it won't be easy at all. You're going to see that the Gemini person is very happy in a social setting. You are not going to make out only that they are sad. And suddenly, you see a very brief moment on their face that, there is a sudden dismay on their face, which is unexplained given the social setting around them. And you can easily point that out in such a way, let's say, for example, a Gemini will definitely attend social parties even though they are more of a tendency, or they have a higher proclivity to be alone in a gathering kind of a setting. That means, they just want to sit in a party for a formality with a drink in their hands, that, yeah, this is my presence is known over here, that I am also a part of this. Probably I don't feel a sense of belonging, so I'm going to not talk to anybody, but I'm still a part of it. And if a Gemini is actually sad, they're going to refuse to even do that small formality. And if somebody is in a relationship with a Gemini, they would pick up that emotional cue. And when they pick up that emotional cue, they want the Gemini person to be a little bit honest about their feelings upfront to them at least. But the Gemini will not still say anything about it. They would still run away from their own feelings. And this harms them quite a lot. Why? Because they would have lost a genuine connection who was able to pick up an emotional cue in such a social setting as well. And when this happens, the Gemini is traumatized at a later point in time when they reveal their cards, or when they realize better that, I actually lost a genuine person in my life. And then there is a very huge of room of regret, you can say, within them. And that is how fundamentally things operate for them. So they need to learn to evolve this tendency. They need to be a little bit accepting, and they shouldn't hunt people down thinking and fearing vulnerability to that extent, to be frank. So that is what is all about the negative traits of Gemini. Now we'll explore something different, which is compatibility of Gemini with each signs in terms of scenario.